The Super Nintendo had a lot of great fast-paced action-packed games, but sometimes you just feel like kicking back and relaxing, playing a chill game to unwind without a lot of stress. Luckily, this is another area the system really excelled, with tons of unique titles you can still pick up and enjoy this many years later. I can pretty much guarantee there are going to be at least a couple of games here you've never seen before. So open up a cold beer or grab a warm glass of milk and come along with me as we explore some of the coziest games for the Super Nintendo. An RPG about farming? Talk about a hard sell, but this epic adventure in agriculture is as fun as it is original. These were the words of EGM's Crispin Boyer in his review of what was at that time a totally unique and groundbreaking experience, Harvest Moon. Was Harvest Moon the first farming sim ever released? No, there had been others, such as Maxis's Sim Farm that had come out a few years prior on the PC, a top-down builder very much in the vein of SimCity. How about the first life sim? Nah, those go way back, with games like Activision's Little Computer People in 1985. And Harvest Moon definitely wasn't the first RPG, far from it. But what the game did that was so original is it took all of these things and combined them into an experience that was so unexpectedly fun, it birthed an entire genre that's still going strong today. Many even credit Harvest Moon with being one of the first truly cozy games, making it a fitting start for this journey we're on. Harvest Moon invites players into a world where the simple pleasures of rural life unfold naturally. At its heart, the gameplay centers on farming, a process that begins with planting seeds in freshly tilled soil, nurturing them through careful attention, and eventually reaping the rewards of a bountiful harvest. This cycle of growth and renewal offers a deep sense of accomplishment as players watch their efforts transform the land. Beyond crops, the game involves tending to animals, managing resources, and expanding the farm, creating a rhythm of daily tasks that feels both purposeful and engaging. But the experience extends far beyond the fields, weaving in a rich layer of social interaction. Players encounter a cast of villagers, each with their own distinct personalities, stories, and needs. Interacting with them, whether by lending a hand with a task, joining in a lively festival, or exchanging a few kind words, builds meaningful connections over time. These relationships anchor players in the life of the town, making them feel like a vital part of its heartbeat, sharing in its celebrations and small triumphs. What truly distinguishes Harvest Moon is its gentle, unhurried flow. There's no serious rush to finish tasks or chase grand objectives. Instead, the game opens up a space to linger in the moment. Players can wander through the countryside as the seasons shift, take in the quiet beauty of a starry night, or simply enjoy the steady cadence of farm life. This freedom to set your own pace fosters an immersive escape, where the warmth of the sun and the rustle of leaves seem almost tangible, drawing players into a world that celebrates the beauty of the everyday. This immersion is helped quite a lot by the game's excellent late SNES graphics. And when I say late SNES, I really mean it. Harvest Moon came out in North America in the summer of '97, almost a full month after the N64 had already been released. Despite this, the game sold decently well enough in fact to launch a huge franchise. 2 franchises actually when you include Story of Seasons, but we'll leave that topic for another time. But players found a lot to love even in this first entry's humble beginnings, and it holds up well today. Like the protagonist of the game starting out with nothing and building a successful life with a happy family, so too has Harvest Moon built its legacy in the decades that followed. Remarked producer Yasuhiro Wada in 2016, "I see Harvest Moon more as my child now. It's all grown up. It's married, it's started a family, and it's doing its own thing now. I'm curious as to how it's gonna do from here on out." Kirby's Dream Course offers a fresh twist on the mini-golf genre. Only here you don't just swing a club, you guide Kirby, who doubles as the ball, through playful courses packed with enemies and obstacles. It's simple to grasp, but keeps you hooked as you figure out the best way to tackle each stage. The game began life as Special Tee Shot, with a similar premise, but of course without the famous pink protagonist. But when Dreamland became a huge hit on the Game Boy, developers HAL Laboratory and Nintendo shifted to include Kirby, a move that would prove to be a smart one, since this edition elevated not just the aesthetics and branding of the game, but also prompted the addition of interesting Kirby-centric gameplay mechanics. Interestingly, a playable prototype of the original Kirby-less Special Tee Shot was preserved and made public in 2019. Special Tee Shot was a lot further along than you might think, so much so that Nintendo decided to release a slightly modified version for the Satellaview in Japan a couple years later. But there were some major changes made to accommodate HAL's star Game Boy mascot. Kirby's charm shines through as he bounces and floats, dodging hazards and outsmarting enemies. There's a spark of joy in watching him soar just right or knock out a foe with a well-aimed roll. At its core, Kirby's Dream Course thrives on creativity and clever design, and the unrushed flow invites you to take a breather and just enjoy its colorful world. Every hole offers a small burst of satisfaction, from the sound of Kirby landing perfectly to the sight of a cleared path. The game moves at an easygoing pace, letting you pause and plan without pressure. You can line up shots, experiment with angles, and enjoy the journey through bright, imaginative landscapes. The visuals pop with color, and the music hums along with light and catchy melodies. For some competitive excitement, there's the option to play a multiplayer versus mode, with one person taking on the role of the yellow Kirby clone Kirby. This would be the first ever yellow version of Kirby, though it remains somewhat of a mystery whether any future yellow-colored Kirbys are always Kirby or simply an identical yellow Kirby. Kirby's Dream Course has been re-released a few times over the years, but surprisingly never received a fully fledged sequel after a planned N64 game ended up being cancelled. However, many of the concepts that would have made it into that game did appear in 2003's Kirby Air Ride, a moderately successful racing game on the GameCube that would inspire its own successor on the Switch 2 in 2025. The Lost Vikings was the first ever game developed solely by a little-known studio by the name of Silicon and Synapse. Founded by college friends Michael Morhaime, Alan Adam, and Frank Pierce, Silicon and Synapse would go on to become one of the most influential studios of all time, rebranding briefly as Chaos Studios and then finally as Blizzard Entertainment. But it all started on the Super Nintendo back in 1993 with their first solo game, The Lost Vikings. A puzzle platformer, The Lost Vikings was heavily influenced by the smash hit PC game Lemmings, a 90s mainstay that maintained a position in the top 40 games by sales for almost the entire decade. Mike Morhaime said in a 2011 interview, "Everyone in the office was playing Lemmings at the time and loving it. We especially liked the way they had characters with unique abilities working together to solve interesting puzzles." With that style of gameplay in mind, Vikings started out as a puzzle game that involved a lot of Viking characters on screen simultaneously. In the game that eventually resulted, players guide three distinct Vikings: Eric, who jumps and bashes through obstacles, Balog, armed with a bow and sword, and Olaf, who blocks attacks and glides with his shield. The core gameplay hinges on switching between these characters, combining their unique abilities to navigate levels and tackle challenges. This mechanic demands thoughtful planning, as each Viking's skills must be used in harmony to progress, turning every stage into a challenging test of ingenuity. The level design is intricate, with puzzles that reward careful observation and creative solutions. Each stage builds on the last, presenting fresh obstacles that feel satisfying to overcome thanks to their well-crafted complexity. Visually, the game shines with vibrant, detailed graphics and a fetching art style that brings the Viking world to life, creating an inviting backdrop to the action. Controls are intuitive and responsive, making it seamless to swap between characters and execute their abilities with precision. This fluidity enhances the experience, allowing players to immerse themselves fully in the problem-solving process. The later Genesis version of the game includes a co-op multiplayer mode where friends can team up to conquer the challenges together, and also adds a few extra levels. But it was on the Super Nintendo where many experienced this classic puzzler for the first time, and this would be far from the last we'd see of Eric, Balog, and Olaf, as they'd return for a sequel in 1997, in addition to cameos in many famous Blizzard properties from Warcraft to Starcraft, and even Heroes of the Storm. First releasing on the PC, SimCity was successful enough to get the attention of Nintendo's Shigeru Miyamoto, who was so impressed with the game that he saw to it that a version was created for the Super Nintendo that even became one of the few launch titles for the system. SimCity places players in the role of a mayor tasked with designing and managing a city from the ground up. You begin on a totally empty map chosen by you out of the impressive 1,000 available to pick from, zoning areas for residential, commercial, and industrial use, while laying down critical infrastructure like power plants, police stations, and fire departments. The gameplay revolves around maintaining a delicate balance, ensuring sufficient power, keeping traffic moving, and addressing citizen needs. Players manage budgets, adjust tax rates, and respond to challenges like fires, earthquakes, or even monster attacks that can disrupt their carefully crafted urban landscape. The gameplay encourages creativity, letting players shape their city at their own speed. You can experiment with different layouts, tweak zones, and refine your vision without pressure, watching as a modest town gradually transforms into a thriving metropolis. This sense of progression, seeing roads fill with traffic and skyscrapers rise, offers a rewarding payoff for your efforts. The game also weaves in subtle lessons on urban planning and resource management, making every decision feel meaningful, whether it's rerouting a highway or budgeting for a new stadium. And the Super Nintendo version features fun Nintendo Easter eggs like Bowser taking on the role of the creature attack disaster monster, and a placeable statue of Mario himself if you manage to achieve the ultimate goal of reaching 500,000 residents, the vaunted Megalopolis. You might think Kirby's Dream Course was HAL Laboratories' first go at the golf genre, but in fact they had a long history in the genre prior to that one. Actually, the studio's second ever game was 1984's NES title Golf. But for many kids of the 90s, the one that sticks out the most is HAL's Hole-in-One Golf on the Super Nintendo. HAL's Hole-in-One delivers an 18-hole golf experience viewed from a top-down perspective, blending straightforward mechanics with some pretty engrossing features. Players can input custom names for up to 4 participants and choose between stroke or match play modes. On the course, wind speed indicators and water hazards keep gameplay clear and strategic. A practice mode lets players refine their swings, while a tournament mode pits them against 60 competitors, extending the challenge and replay value. Another clever twist is the password system, letting players save and revisit standout shots like eagles or holes-in-one, offering a handy way to study expert moves. The game looks pretty good, benefiting from the SNES's Mode 7 effects, which adds elevation to certain camera angles, giving the courses a lively depth. Detailed graphics, such as the tiny golfer in the swing meter and a polished opening cinematic, bring charm to the presentation. Sound design fits the experience, though the music loops do wear a little thin over long sessions. One of mankind's most relaxing pastimes, from the comfort of your own home and a smooth and visually pleasing package, make HAL's Hole-in-One Golf a great way to spend a lazy Sunday. Wario's Woods, launched in 1994 on both the NES and the Super Nintendo, offers a fresh take on the puzzle genre. Players guide Toad across a grid, arranging falling monsters and bombs by matching colors to clear them before the screen overflows. Unlike typical block-dropping games where pieces stack as they land, Toad's ability to roam freely, pick up, and reposition objects introduces a layer of strategy and hands-on control. This feature sets the game apart, giving players a sense of agency over the chaos. The game shines with its adorable cast. Cute, lively monsters and Toad's determined waddle steal the show, while Wario pops in with cheeky taunts to stir the pot. Bright visuals paired with catchy, upbeat tunes craft an atmosphere that's hard to resist. The controls feel snappy and precise, with every successful match delivering satisfying visual cues, keeping the flow smooth and intuitive. Difficulty ramps up thoughtfully, with early stages easing newcomers into the mechanics while later levels toss faster drops and trickier patterns into the mix, testing even seasoned players. This challenging yet laid-back gameplay, alongside the game's pleasing quirks like the pint-sized enemies' goofy expressions, keeps things light and makes Wario's Woods worth a go for puzzle fans. Developed by the small but surprisingly prolific Japanese developer Pandora Box, the charming hidden gem Arabian Nights is a traditional turn-based RPG that distinguishes itself with its unique Arabian theme and simple card-based battle system. Take on the role of Shukran, a young orphan who finds a ring housing Ifrit, the king of the jinns, and sets out to restore peace to her desert homeland. Exploration plays a key role, with diverse locations like deserts and palaces offering a sense of adventure as players hunt for crystals containing the sealed power of the King of Spirits. The small party, made up of Shukran, Ifrit, and a young thief called Hardy, is endearing, and their personalities enrich the narrative, which is somewhat straightforward yet ultimately satisfying. Visually, the game shines with lively pixel art, leveraging the SNES's color capabilities to craft detailed character designs and expressive animations that bring the Arabian world to life. Clocking in at under 15 hours, Arabian Nights might be a good candidate for those who want a fun and well-made RPG that doesn't demand too much, while multiple endings tied to player choices encourage replaying to uncover different outcomes. While it only released in Japan, Western gamers are in luck because in 2012, a team of dedicated fans translated the game into English. The team notes, "We tried our best to allow for a pleasing experience in English and make as few compromises as possible. Arabian Nights remains a cozy hidden gem, a worthwhile product of the golden era of RPGs on the Super Nintendo." While most people are aware of or even have fond memories of SimCity on the Super Nintendo, did you know that another Maxis Sim game released for the system in the very same year? SimEarth offers a captivating experience where players take charge of an entire planet's development, guiding its geological, atmospheric, and biological evolution. The gameplay centers on tweaking variables like temperature, humidity, and terrain to foster life, starting with simple organisms and progressing to advanced civilizations. Players introduce species and watch them adapt, creating a dynamic process that unfolds over time. The very deep and complex systems offer plenty of challenging fun for more strategic gamers who don't mind staring at maps or moving sliders back and forth instead of the much more common action platforming fare offered by most other games at the time. The game also weaves in educational value with detailed data on earth science and ecology accessible through menus, enriching the experience without overwhelming the player. What really sets SimEarth apart from many others that released in 1991 though is its open-ended nature. Will Wright commented on this in 1996 during a presentation at Stanford University, saying, "SimEarth isn't exactly a game, it's what we call a software toy. Toys, by definition, are more flexible and open-ended than games. When you play with SimEarth or any of our software toys, don't limit yourself with trying to win. Play with it, experiment, try new things, just have fun." While SimEarth never caught on with mainstream audiences to the same extent that SimCity did, its influence is seen in future titles, most obviously Maxis's 2008 classic Spore, which took some of the basic concepts of SimEarth like terraforming and organism development to a much higher level. Regarded by many as the first god game ever, Populous makes you a deity who must guide your followers across diverse isometric maps. The gameplay centers on shaping the landscape, raising and lowering land to create flat habitable spaces where your people can build settlements and farm. As their population grows, they construct larger buildings and eventually prepare to confront rival tribes. You wield divine powers like earthquakes and volcanoes to alter the terrain or disrupt enemies, adding a strategic layer to your decisions. The visual design uses simple, colorful sprites that clearly depict your evolving world, from small huts to sprawling towns. Rob Hubbard's soundtrack fills the experience with ambient melodies that match the steady pace of your progress. As you advance, new abilities unlock, such as swamps or night transformations, encouraging you to experiment with different tactics across varied maps and scenarios. This variety keeps each playthrough distinct, with hundreds of levels offering inventive challenges. Your followers act autonomously once you've set the stage, building and multiplying based on the land you provide. Success therefore hinges on balancing their growth with your divine interventions, like merging them into stronger warriors to face enemy factions. The game lets you dictate the flow, largely free from time pressure as you watch your civilization take shape. The interface, though basic, ties into the Super Nintendo's controls seamlessly, making actions intuitive over time. Like with SimCity, Populous began on the PC, and many fans do consider this still to be the superior experience, though a sequel called Trials of the Olympian Gods also released for the SNES and improved on some of the clunkiness from this first console attempt. Lead designer Peter Molyneux would go on to become something of a father of the god game genre, creating Dungeon Keeper, Black and White, and Goddess, as well as other series like Fable and Theme Park. Yet another Lemmings-inspired puzzle platformer, The Humans differentiates itself with bigger and more striking visuals like the 24x16 human sprites, and some interesting new mechanics. In the game, you guide a tribe of prehistoric humans through a series of inventive levels, with the gameplay revolving around using their unique abilities like stacking, throwing, and wielding tools to solve puzzles and navigate obstacles. Each level feels like a new challenge, with clever designs that encourage creative thinking and experimentation. You're not locked into one solution, instead the game invites you to try different approaches, making every success feel well earned. You'll need to coordinate their actions, leveraging each human's strengths to progress. The mechanics are straightforward, yet offer enough complexity to keep you engaged, while the pacing builds gradually. Early levels teach you the basics, and later ones layer in new twists and turns, ensuring a smooth flow that never feels rushed. This steady progression keeps the experience approachable, yet rewarding. The game's world is brought to life with colorful graphics that paint a charming prehistoric setting. Every detail from the lush environments to the humans' quirky animations adds a sense of warmth and personality. What stands out is how the humans balances challenge with accessibility. The puzzles are thoughtfully crafted, tough enough to make you think, but never so hard that you're stuck for long. This harmony, paired with the freedom to experiment a little bit, creates a gameplay loop that feels fulfilling. Whether you're stacking humans to reach a ledge or tossing spears to clear a path, there's a quiet joy in figuring things out. Developed by Ape Inc., a developer primarily known for its roles in the Mother series, as well as Pokemon later on under the name Creatures Inc., Mario's Super Picross is the third entry in the long-lasting Picross franchise that continues to this day, with the most recent titles released in 2024 and 25. In Picross games, the idea is to reveal a hidden picture by filling in cells on a grid based on numerical clues. The puzzles, also known as nonogram puzzles, require logic and creativity to solve, cross-referencing clues, spotting force moves, and ruling out options. In Super Picross, there are two modes: Mario mode, with its helpful hints and bright welcoming vibe, and Wario mode, which ramps up the challenge with time limits and penalties for errors. This variety lets players choose their pace and intensity. The interface keeps things smooth and intuitive. Marking squares, flagging mistakes, and undoing moves all feel effortless with the Super Nintendo controller, letting the focus stay on the puzzles themselves. With over 300 puzzles across both modes, the sheer volume of content ensures a steady stream of fresh challenges, encouraging players to dive back in whenever they have some spare time. Initially releasing only in Japan, Super Picross was finally made available worldwide as part of Nintendo Classics on the Switch and Switch 2. Often topping lists of the best puzzle games of all time on the Super Nintendo and even winning awards like EGM's 1996 Super Nintendo Game of the Year, Tetris Attack did much more than merely haphazardly bolt some Nintendo IPs onto a Tetris clone. In fact, the game has little to do with Tetris at all. So little that famous Tetris entrepreneur Hank Rogers had this to say in a 2009 interview. "Nintendo came to me soon after we formed the Tetris company, and we were just wrestling with what we were going to do. And so, at that time, we had the copyright, the gameplay, and the name Tetris, and our Russian partners who knew nothing about nothing, and I'm not talking about Alexei, I'm talking about Electronica Technica, they wanted to make money no matter what. That's it. However you could make money, make money. When Nintendo came to us and said, we would like to take this Japanese game called Panel de Pon and rename it Tetris Attack, I'm saying, it's not Tetris, but my partner's saying, but it is money. So I reluctantly agreed. In retrospect, we should never have done that. I don't think that's a good idea. It dilutes the brand. It's like naming another cartoon character Mickey Mouse just because you need the money. It's just a bad idea, so I wouldn't do that again." Despite this, surprisingly, both Rogers and series creator Alexei Pajitnov praised Tetris Attack as a good game that should have been able to stand on its own merits. Interestingly, the game did release with a totally unique brand in Japan, where it was called Panel de Pon, and while this version did sell okay, it failed to crack even the top 100 in the year it released, so perhaps Nintendo made the right decision after all. In the game, players wield an on-screen cursor to strategically arrange brightly colored blocks into horizontal or vertical rows. Matching 3 or more blocks of the same color triggers a satisfying burst of destruction, causing any blocks above to tumble down and potentially spark chain reactions. Quick thinkers can rack up impressive combos by clearing more than 3 blocks in a single move. As the game unfolds, the blocks rise steadily towards the top of the screen, with more spawning from below, and if the blocks reach the top of the playfield, it's game over, so players need to stay sharp. There are various game modes including endless mode, timed mode, and even a story mode. There's also a competitive side-by-side multiplayer mode, which was a pretty standard expectation of later puzzle games like this one, but executed particularly well here. Tetris Attack has a pretty big legacy that might not immediately be obvious to series newcomers because it actually inspired an entire franchise of sequels over the next 20 years, though these would move away from the Tetris brand and go instead by the name Puzzle League. For as long as Nintendo has been shaping video game history, there have been others in Japan doing the same in their own important ways, often overshadowed internationally by other giants of the industry from that country, such as Sega and Capcom. One such company is known as Taito Corporation. Responsible for hundreds of video games since the 1970s, Taito is undeniably most famous for its hit arcade games like Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble, both of which were hugely influential titles that made it onto a variety of other platforms, including Nintendo systems. For Bubble Bobble in particular, the NES version is considered by some to be the best one, and this is the platform on which it gained a lot of its lasting popularity. It's no surprise then that when the many Bubble Bobble sequels and spin-offs hit the arcade, a Nintendo port was not far off. Such was the case for Bust a Move, also known as Puzzle Bobble in Japan. Bust a Move is a puzzle game that probably looks familiar even if you've never played it, since it inspired so many copycats over the years on all platforms, even including mobile phones. You control a pointer at the bottom of the screen, shooting colored baubles towards a descending cluster at the top. The objective is to match 3 or more bubbles of the same color, causing them to pop and disappear, with the ultimate goal of clearing the screen before the bubbles reach the bottom. Its cheerful and upbeat, if repetitive, soundtrack pairs perfectly with the cute visuals, spotlighting lovable characters like Bub and Bob. This blend crafts an inviting world that's easy to sink into. The early levels ease players into the mechanics, while later stages introduce new bubble types, obstacles, and quicker descents, sharpening the challenge without overwhelming. This gradual progression lets players build skill and feel a sense of growth as they advance. With extremely addictive gameplay, it's no wonder Bust a Move has inspired so many clones over the years. In fact, Taito themselves, now owned incidentally by another Japanese gaming giant, Square Enix, have even cashed in with multiple remakes and sequels, such as 2023's Puzzle Bobble Every Bobble on the Switch, with interesting new features like a Puzzle Bobble vs. Space Invaders game mode. Yet another game inspired by Lemmings, Toddlers once more features small wandering creatures you as the player must guide to safety by shaping their surroundings. In the game, you play as a wizard-like character with the ability to conjure and remove blocks, crafting paths to lead the titular Toddlers to an exit. What sets this game apart from others is the Toddler's ability to stroll along walls and ceilings, defying gravity in a way that demands clever three-dimensional thinking. The game's cartoony visuals, full of cute characters and bright landscapes, are accompanied by an upbeat, cheerful soundtrack that, while good, doesn't quite match the legendary music of Lemmings. Another thing differentiating Toddlers from Lemmings is the way that you interact directly with the environment to guide the creatures, contrary to the latter's approach involving directly giving commands to the creatures themselves. This shifts the emphasis a little bit more to strategic puzzle solving, amplified by varied goals across levels. One stage might task you with guiding Toddlers to the exit, while another has you collecting gems or eliminating zombie Toddlers, rogue creatures that add a fun twist to the challenge. These diverse objectives keep each new puzzle from getting stale. As an added bonus, Toddlers is even compatible with the SNES mouse, an advantage it enjoys even over the original Lemmings game for that system. Whether you're nudging a Toddler onto a ceiling path or clearing a blockade, there's a satisfying rhythm to each solution. For those with a friend, the Super Nintendo version even offers a multiplayer mode where two players can collaborate or compete with each other, adding a social spark to the fun. Toddlers delivers an experience that's easy to pick up yet rewarding to master, standing out as a creative gem that adds a sufficient amount to the familiar Lemmings formula to warrant giving it its own shot. Alright, so we've covered a few games inspired by Lemmings already, but we'd be remiss not to mention the amazingly successful Psygnosis game itself, which of course has its own SNES port released less than a year after it first came out on Amiga PCs. It's difficult to overstate the immense impact that Lemmings had in the early 90s, especially to someone who wasn't there at the time. But it's kind of weird in a way. Like Tetris, Lemmings sold tens of millions of copies throughout the decade and popularized a whole new genre of games, inspiring many clones and copycats. And yet for some reason Tetris's notoriety has endured into the 21st century to a far greater extent than Lemmings. If you've got any theories about why this is, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But no matter what the various strengths, weaknesses, innovations, and duplications of the many Lemmings-like games that followed, most 90s gamers favor the one that started it all. And even though many purists would have you believe that the only proper way to play is on the PC, the Super Nintendo port developed by Sunsoft is no slouch. With intuitive and smooth controls, despite no support for the SNES mouse quite yet, this would come with Lemmings too, interesting and varied level design, and addictive gameplay that has you promising yourself just one more level, there's a good reason why Lemmings was such a hit. The only minor gripe that some have with the Super Nintendo version is that despite the sound and music being acceptable, there was just no way for a Super Nintendo game to match the PC in this regard. Just listen to the two side by side and you'll see exactly what I mean. Regardless of the somewhat lackluster music, at least when compared to the PC platforms, the SNES version of Lemmings still remains totally playable to this day and was easily the best console port of this legendary puzzle platformer, at least until it released on the PlayStation 7 years later. Melfand Stories is a fantasy-themed action beat-em-up game where players choose one of four heroes, Elle the rogue, Corse the soldier, Lemon the wizard, or Nora the thief, to navigate vibrant 2D side-scrolling levels and battle enemies to save the kingdom of Melfand. The gameplay centers on straightforward mechanics, attacking, jumping, blocking, and using limited magic items, making it easy to pick up and yet fun and exciting to master. After each stage, players select between easy or hard paths, unlocking branching routes and multiple endings that encourage exploration and replay. The levels, short and snappy at just a few minutes each, burst with colorful graphics and a whimsical art style, blending anime and fairy tale vibes. Delightful enemies like animated armor and giant centipedes populate the stages, while visually striking bosses challenge players with simple, predictable patterns. Two-player co-op adds to the fun, letting friends team up to tackle the adventure. The game's brevity, with playthroughs clocking in at only around 30 minutes, pairs with its lighthearted tone, creating an experience that invites repeated visits that you can keep coming back to without a huge time investment. It's a bite-sized yet satisfying romp through a magical world, perfect for quick sessions or multiple runs to see every outcome. And now might just be the perfect time to try out this hidden gem, because even though it never released outside Japan, in 2024 a fan translation finally dropped, making the game fully accessible to the English-speaking world for the first time. Our next cozy Super Nintendo game is a tile-matching puzzle game called Yoshi's Cookie. Like seemingly every game of this sort featuring first-party Nintendo characters, Yoshi's Cookie actually began as a completely different title. In this case, the game began as an arcade title called Hermetica. When the developer Home Data location tested the machine though, it was clear that Hermetica was gonna be a tough sell and would maybe even flop, so Home Data started looking to offload the game to somebody else. Enter Bulletproof Software, one of the main licensees of Tetris itself, headed up by none other than Hank Rogers, who had struck up a friendship with Tetris creator Alexei Pajitnov that would eventually culminate in the founding of the Tetris Company in 1996. Bulletproof Software bought Hermetica from Home Data and began working on a Super Nintendo version of the game. Meanwhile, Nintendo bought the 8-bit rights to the game, which they set to work retheming to feature Mario characters. The result, now called Yoshi's Cookie, was also licensed to Bulletproof for the SNES version, which therefore became a rare example of a game featuring Mario characters that was neither developed nor published by Nintendo themselves. The basic gist of the gameplay is pretty straightforward. Players try to match cookies across an entire row in order to clear it from the playing field, rotating entire lines in a similar fashion to a Rubik's Cube. There are multiple game modes, including, of course, the obligatory multiplayer mode, as well as a single-player action mode and a puzzle mode. The puzzle mode, available on the SNES version only, featured puzzles created by the famous Alexei Pajitnov. The game was a moderate success, though it would never reach the heights of Pajitnov's original work. Mario and Yoshi weren't the only ones to capitalize on the falling block puzzle craze of the 90s. In 1995, HAL Laboratory released Kirby's very own take on the genre, and as usual, the game was originally not actually a Kirby game. It released in Japan as Super Puyo Puyo, the 6th entry in the Puyo Puyo franchise developed by Compile. There's a long and complicated history when it comes to Puyo Puyo games and their various remakes and reskins on different platforms. For instance, with one Sega Genesis release being rebranded Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine in North America and Europe. For whatever reason, there just wasn't a lot of confidence in the Puyo Puyo brand performing well overseas. All this meant when it came time to bring Super Puyo Puyo to North America and Europe, publisher Nintendo decided the safest bet was to make it a Kirby game. Incidentally, since it had already been released in Japan as Super Puyo Puyo, this game holds the distinction of being the only Kirby game ever not to release there. As for the game itself, players stack colored blocks known as puffs in a vertical playfield similar to Tetris. The objective is to match 3 or more puffs of the same color to make them disappear, preventing the stack from reaching the top of the screen. The game's appeal lies mainly in its winsome presentation. The colorful graphics and cheerful animations create a visually pleasing experience, and the integration of Kirby characters feels nostalgic in retrospect, though of course they were only newly ascendant at the time. The lighthearted nature of the game, embodied by Kirby's ever-smiling face and the whimsical world he inhabits, adds a feeling of ease and enjoyment that you can't help but feel while playing. Few activities, whether in real life or in video games, epitomize coziness more than fishing. So this list wouldn't be complete unless we featured at least one of the myriad fishing games available for the Super Nintendo. Widely considered one of the best examples on the system is 1994's Bassin's Black Bass with Hank Parker. Actually part of a series created by developers Hot Bee and Starfish, Bassin's Black Bass delivers a standout fishing experience through its depth, realism, and captivating gameplay. Players begin as amateurs, progressing through tournaments across diverse lakes like the shallow, plant-rich Green Valley Lake and the deeper, structure-filled Bluestone Lake. Each location features unique characteristics, such as abundant vegetation or sunken objects that demand adaptive fishing strategies, keeping every outing fresh and challenging. The tournament structure of the game drives the progression, pushing players towards a championship showdown with Hank Parker himself, a real-life famous bass fisherman that's won 2 different Bassmaster Classic tournaments, one in 1979 and one in 1989. Parker's one of only 5 fishermen in history who have won this tournament more than once. And forgive me my digression here, but I just have to talk about Parker's family for a sec. He and his wife have 4 sons together. Hank Jr. and Billy are professional NASCAR drivers. Ben is a professional fisherman like his dad, and Timothy is a professional MMA fighter. Is this not the most American family you've ever heard of? Anyway, in the game, catching fish doesn't just advance your rank, it also boosts your stats, weaving in an RPG-like thread into the experience that fuels long-term motivation. Motivation is further helped by the pacing of the game, which feels deliberate, letting players explore lakes and refine tactics at their own rhythm, while the vivid graphics and dynamic weather paint an immersive outdoor world. While the decades since have yielded a treasure trove of fishing games, each benefiting from innovations that make for a better and more immersive experience, those looking for a simpler, retro take on this genre could do a lot worse than Bassin's Black Bass on the Super Nintendo. Mario Paint offers a distinctive blend of creativity and simple gameplay that stands out and makes the game one of the most memorable on the console. At its heart, the game provides a suite of tools for art and music creation that were surprisingly robust for the time. Players can dive into drawing with an assortment of brushes, stamps, and patterns, enabling them to craft a variety of different artworks. The music composer complements this, featuring an intuitive interface where players arrange Mario-themed sounds and instruments to create original melodies. These features encourage experimentation and imagination in a straightforward, accessible way. For many, Mario Paint was their first ever experience with computer artwork. Beyond this, the game also functioned as a tech demo of sorts for the SNES mouse, which it came bundled with. Not only was the mouse the best way to experience the creative side of Mario Paint, there was also an addictive mini-game called Gnat Attack, wherein players use the mouse to control a fly swatter and try to swat as many flies as they can, culminating with an enormous boss fly at the end. The interface really ties everything together, designed for ease of use with the point-and-click style that leverages the mouse accessory well. This setup ensures that navigating between drawing, composing, and minigames feels smooth and natural, even for those new to such tools, as of course most people were in 1992. The combination of flexible creative tools, a quirky minigame, and an approachable interface fosters a sense of freedom and playfulness. And the Mario-themed aesthetic ties it all into a cohesive package that feels distinctly Nintendo, encouraging players to explore and tinker at their own pace. Whether sketching a scene, composing a tune, or swatting flies, Mario Paint delivers a unique gameplay loop that balances creativity with just enough structure to keep things engaging. It's a title that showcases the SNES's potential beyond traditional gaming, offering an experience that's easy to pick up and hard to put down, even decades later. Pieces, released in 1994, delivers a unique and simple gameplay experience built around digital jigsaw puzzles. Developed by Prism Kikaku as their debut game, this title shines with its clear design and straightforward mechanics, carving a niche spot in the Super Nintendo collection. Pieces tasks the player with assembling jigsaw puzzles drawn from themes like sports and worldwide landmarks. Each category includes puzzles ranging from 36 to 60 pieces, offering a mix that keeps the experience diverse yet balanced in difficulty. Players can choose between the Super Nintendo mouse or a standard controller. The mouse, in particular, perfectly mirrors the hands-on feel of fitting physical puzzle pieces together, while the intuitive controls allow any puzzle lover to jump in with ease. The main draw, though, is the multiplayer mode, supporting up to 5 players in head-to-head challenges against each other or computer opponents with adjustable difficulty. Some of you might be wondering, how on earth could 5 players play on a Super Nintendo game simultaneously? Well, this was enabled via a peripheral called a multi-tap accessory. There were a few of these available for the Super Nintendo, though surprisingly all of them were developed by third parties, since none were ever developed by Nintendo themselves. The first to be developed, and by far the most popular, was Hudson Soft's Super Multitap, which was supported by an impressive 100 games or so. Anyway, Pieces, 1994's fun little competitive jigsaw game, ended up being a pretty modest start for Prism Kikaku, which would go on to later create the Disgaea series of tactical RPGs under the name Nippon Ichi, a series that's still going strong today with almost 36 entries as of 2025. Our final Maxis entry on this list is SimAnt, which released on the Super Nintendo in 1993. A sim game that places players in command of an ant colony, SimAnt delivers a distinctive mix of strategy, exploration, and even learning. In the game, you oversee both individual ants and the colony as a whole, managing tasks like gathering food, digging tunnels, and fending off threats such as spiders or rival ants. The mechanics shine through their ability to simplify intricate systems into something approachable, letting players ease into mastering ant life and ecology step by step. As you guide the colony's growth, there's a rewarding sense of nurturing a thriving community, watching ants work together to overcome obstacles and expand their territory. Interactions with the environment, like navigating a backyard or avoiding human interference, add a layer of charm and uniqueness to the experience. The Super Nintendo version introduces 8 new scenarios in which players must eliminate enemy red ants across a variety of locations, each featuring its own hazards. SimAnt ended up being a hit game, but in a way that surprised even the famous creator Will Wright, who commented in a 2004 interview, "SimAnt really surprised me. It's the first time I did a game that appealed to a totally different demographic than I was expecting. SimAnt was actually a big hit with 10 to 13-year-olds. Parents would buy it and kids would play it, and the kids just loved it. Still to this day, a lot of people tell me, I loved SimAnt. It was my favorite game." And it did very well. It's just that I was expecting it to be more older people that would appreciate how amazingly interesting ants are as an example of distributed intelligence. In some sense, I was trying to use a wacky approach to show how intrinsically interesting ants are as an information processing system. But in fact, I ended up appealing to 12-year-olds who just love playing with ants. When Kirby's Dream Land 3 came out for the Super Nintendo in late 1997, it was one of the last games ever to do so. To put things into some context, when this game came out on the Super Nintendo, people were already enjoying games on the N64 like Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, Star Fox 64, GoldenEye 007. Diddy Kong Racing came out the same week as Kirby's Dream Land 3 in North America. So to say this game was a little late to the party would be an understatement. The result was that this entry in the franchise went by fairly unnoticed, and to this day not many people have actually played it. And while most Kirby aficionados focus on fan favorite Kirby Superstar, Dream Land 3 does have its own place as a solid platformer on the SNES. Like in earlier Dream World entries, this game lets Kirby inhale enemies to copy their powers, bringing variety and strategy to every encounter. Players can experiment with abilities like fire or ice, tailoring their approach to challenges and uncovering new ways to progress. This is enhanced by Kirby's animal friends, Rick the Hamster, Coo the Owl, and many others who join him to unlock unique moves and reach hidden areas. Players can also summon Gooey at any time, who returns from Kirby's Dream Land 2 and brings a fun multiplayer element to the game at the cost of 2 hearts from Kirby. The levels are thoughtfully crafted, blending exploration with just the right amount of challenge. Each stage hides hidden secrets and branching paths, encouraging players to poke around at their own pace. The game never really rushes you too much, letting the experience unfold naturally. Benefiting from the increased capabilities of the 16-bit SNES platform, Kirby's Dream Land 3 is a feast of bright colors and adorable characters, with detailed backgrounds that make the Dreamland feel alive like never before. There's definitely some replay value for completionists as well, with a special ending reserved for those who find every heart star, collectibles tucked away in every corner that reward curiosity. These factors all combine to make Kirby's Dream Land 3 a worthwhile try for those that missed it. Yoshi's Island is a beloved platform game with a simple yet inviting story. The adventure begins when Kamek, a wicked Magikoopa, kidnaps baby Luigi and tries to snatch baby Mario too. Enter Yoshi, the brave dinosaur who steps up to protect Mario. Together they journey through buoyant, imaginative levels filled with enemies and obstacles. Yoshi uses his unique skills like throwing eggs and ground pounding to keep baby Mario safe while battling Kamek's minions and quirky bosses. The game's colorful art style and creative design shine through as Yoshi presses on to rescue baby Luigi. Shigeru Miyamoto had envisioned a Yoshi-focused game since Super Mario World, rejecting earlier titles like Yoshi's Cookie and Yoshi's Safari for lacking punch. The development process spanned 4 years, from February 1st, 1992 to June 29th, 1995, a notably long period that allowed for significant innovation. Spearheaded by Shigefumi Hino, the creator of Yoshi himself, along with other legendary Nintendo figures of the time like Hisashi Nagami, who contributed to the maker-drawn art style on his first ever game, the team aimed to create a game that really stood out. Under the hood, Yoshi's Island was technologically groundbreaking, utilizing the Super FX graphics chip, one of only a small number of Super Nintendo games to do so, alongside titles like Star Fox. This chip enabled advanced effects such as sprite scaling, multiple background layers, and basic 3D-like visuals, including 3D walls falling into the background and psychedelic undulating effects when touching floating fungi. This made it one of the most technologically advanced games on the console, with effects like Morphmation for dynamic object rotation and advanced parallax scrolling. Despite the advances, an early demo was deemed insufficient compared to Donkey Kong Country's 3D graphics, leading to a deliberate shift towards a more hand-drawn, cartoony aesthetic. This involved drawing on paper, scanning, and approximating pixel by pixel, a labor-intensive process that defined the game's unique storybook-like appearance. But it definitely pays off, as the innovative appeal has held up exceptionally well over time. Yoshi's Island marks the moment when Yoshi really came into his own, launching a whole new sub-franchise in the Mario universe that's resulted in many great games over the years, such as Yoshi's Woolly World, one of the best-selling games for the Wii U. 1992's Pushover was the penultimate game released by UK-based Atari 8-bit developer Red Rat Software as they struggled to adapt to the changing environment of the 90s. It's a puzzle platform game where players guide G.I. Ant, a soldier ant, through 100 levels across 9 themed worlds to recover lost items. The core mechanic centers on pushing dominoes arranged on interconnected platforms. Each level tasks players with triggering a chain reaction by toppling the dominoes in the right order with a single push, clearing the path to the exit. This requires careful planning as one wrong move can disrupt the entire sequence, though the game keeps challenges balanced and approachable. Variety drives the experience forward. Special dominoes, some that explode, split, or vanish, introduce new layers to the puzzles, forcing players to rethink their approach as they advance. The levels span diverse settings like an industrial complex, Aztec ruins, and a space station, each with distinct visuals that keep the backdrop interesting. Difficulty ramps up gradually across the worlds, providing a steady sense of progression. Time limits exist, but lack harsh penalties. If the timer runs out, players can still work on the puzzle, and pausing after time expires offers a subtle hint to nudge them forward. This setup encourages thoughtful experimentation without pressure, letting players linger on solutions at their own pace. The controls are straightforward, ensuring that the focus stays on the puzzles rather than mechanics. Interestingly, the original Amiga Pushover game was sponsored by Quavers, a popular UK snack that are kinda like a thick, curly, puffy sort of potato chip, with odd flavors like prawn cocktail and spicy beef, though the original cheese flavor is probably the most popular. So the plot of the Amiga version revolves around the Quavers mascot Colin Curly losing his chips down an anthill, and G.I. Ant needs to recover these. But since the SNES release lost the Quavers branding, Colin Curly was dropped, and instead you're trying to recover bundles of cash. Another game made by Arabian Nights developers Pandora Box, Magic Knight Rayearth is a traditional turn-based RPG that features characters that fans of the short-lived mid-90s manga and anime series would recognize. The manga series was created in 1993 by Clamp, a distinctive all-female group of artists that was also responsible for X 1999 and Cardcaptor Sakura. While a number of games were created for Magic Knight Rayearth, the most popular being an action RPG for the Sega Saturn, the Super Nintendo game was the only home console-based traditional turn-based RPG for the series. While only released in Japan, fan translations of the game have been around for decades now, with dedicated fans revisiting the translation over the years in attempts to refine it and fix contextual errors. In the game, exploration unfolds at a leisurely rhythm, with towns, dungeons, and expansive landscapes inviting players to linger and uncover the story at their own tempo. The narrative progresses gently, pulling you into Sephiroth's enchanting depths without haste. The gameplay is honestly pretty simplistic, and while beginners might appreciate its accessibility, hardcore RPG fans might find it just a tad too easy. But the game's real charm lies with its colorful pixel art, which captures well the essence of the era's nostalgia, painting a world that feels warm and familiar, especially for anyone who is into mid-90s anime. Complementing this visual charm, the melodic soundtrack weaves an atmosphere that enhances every step of the adventure, from quiet village moments to tense battles. Magic Knight Rayearth is a little-known title that balances depth with simplicity, and while it might err a little on the side of simplicity, many still consider it a memorable hidden gem. You might be forgiven if your first assumption upon hearing the words Super Mario RPG is that this might be a childish, simplistic cash grab that seeks to exploit Nintendo characters we all know and love in a cynical attempt to cash in on a genre that was at its absolute peak in the mid-90s. Even the game's director Chihiro Fujioka recognized this, noting, "The main concern for all involved was that we didn't want to just make a normal RPG that simply substituted in Mario characters like some cheap Final Fantasy sprite swap." But serious RPG fans know that Super Mario RPG is not only a great and worthy Mario game, but actually one of the best RPGs of all time. The only Super Nintendo game to be developed by Squaresoft and published by Nintendo, Super Mario RPG puts you in control of Mario and his companions as you explore diverse areas, battle enemies, and solve puzzles across a geographically diverse land. Exploration, a key component, is enhanced via the inclusion of platforming elements that Mario fans of the time had come to expect, but for the first time ever in a Mario game, this is played out on a 3D isometric view. The 3D perspective provided a new way to experience the Mushroom Kingdom and many other locations in the Mario world, brought to life with colorful graphics, detailed animations, and a spectacular soundtrack created by Yoko Shimomura, who had recently left Capcom after working on games like Street Fighter II and Final Fight, joining Square where she contributed to classics like Legend of Mana and Parasite Eve over her career. In an interview at the time, she stated, "Super Mario Bros. Was my first encounter with video games. I love the music of the Mario series. After I got assigned the job of writing the music for Super Mario RPG, I let my imagination run wild as I composed, trying to find sounds that fit with Mario walking around a town chatting people up, Mario sleeping, Mario just living his life. It's been so fun." Shimomura later left Square and became a freelancer in 2002, but she still works on games for the company to this day, for example as the composer for the upcoming Kingdom Hearts 4. The turn-based battle system of Super Mario RPG is simple yet skillful, as timing button presses can enhance attacks or improve defense, which adds a little bit of skill-based depth to the standard turn-based formula. The skill elements were carefully balanced though, with Miyamoto explaining, "With action games, if the difficulty is too high, you alienate a lot of players. I felt that if we could make a Mario adventure or RPG game that doesn't require good reflexes, it would be something everyone could enjoy." Super Mario RPG was a massive success in Japan and even surpassed expectations of strong results in North America, becoming the third best-selling SNES game in 1996 in the United States, behind Donkey Kong Country 2 and 3. The game has had a lasting legacy beyond the Super Nintendo as well, inspiring spiritual successors like Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi. A remake for the Switch came out in late 2023 with full 3D graphics and updates to gameplay, character, and story elements. Yoko Shimomura even returned to provide the score. Whether the Super Nintendo original or the Switch remake, there's no doubt that Super Mario RPG is a classic RPG and worthwhile play for any RPG fan, Mario lover, or really anyone interested in a fun, cozy experience. DoReMi Fantasy is a platform game developed by Hudson Soft and originally released only in Japan in 1996. It's a delightful platformer that shines as a cozy game thanks to its whimsical gameplay and elfin presentation. Play as Milon in his return following a 10-year gap after 1986 Milon's Secret Castle for the NES, as you seek to rescue your friend Alice and restore music to the land. Armed with a bubble shooter, Milon navigates 7 lively worlds, each packed with quirky enemies, clever platforming challenges, and a boss to cap things off. The gameplay strikes a cozy balance between excitement and lighthearted fun. Milon uses his bubble shooter to trap enemies in bubbles, think Bubble Bobble but with a side-scrolling twist. Each world introduces fresh mechanics like gusty winds or underwater stages, keeping things varied throughout. Before each boss, players explore a fort-like stage, hunting for a hidden key to unlock the exit. This mix of linear platforming and light exploration adds to the fun. What makes DoReMi Fantasy especially cozy though is its atmosphere. The visuals pop with detailed sprites, smooth animations, and soft pastel backgrounds that evoke a fairy tale vibe. The sound design stands out too. Some levels ditch looping tunes for ambient effects like wind, creating a serene, immersive experience. Milon's health, shown through his outfit changing colors from green to blue to red, is an intuitive and intriguing inclusion. Getting hit while wearing red means you lose a life, but unlike in its NES predecessor, you can collect extra lives to keep the game going without having to start all over. DoReMi Fantasy blends enticing aesthetics, innovative audio, and approachable gameplay into a cozy package, and although it released in North America 12 years later on the Wii Virtual Console, it was never officially translated into English. Though as with many others on this list, a group of dedicated fans put in the work to finally provide a complete unofficial translation in 2019. Super Bomberman on the Super Nintendo delivers addictive gameplay through its simple yet strategic mechanics. Players navigate maze-like arenas, placing bombs to destroy soft blocks, enemies, and opponents. Each bomb explodes in a cross pattern, requiring careful timing and positioning to avoid self-inflicted damage while clearing paths or trapping foes. This core loop, move, bomb, dodge, gains depth from spatial awareness and quick decision-making, as the blast radius shapes both offense and defense. Anyone familiar with the Bomberman brand can tell you this gameplay loop is nothing really new, as it's more or less unchanged since the first game came out way back in 1983, becoming a big hit in Hudson Soft's flagship franchise. In single-player mode, players tackle a series of levels to defeat evil robots, facing escalating challenges and boss battles. Each stage introduces new enemy patterns and maze layouts, refining skills like bomb placement and movement. This mode offers structure and progression, sharpening abilities for where the real fun begins, the multiplayer competitive mode. Here, the objective shifts to outlasting rivals, with destructible blocks hiding power-ups like increased bomb capacity, extended blast range, or the ability to kick bombs. These additions create a risk-reward tension, pursue enhancements, or focus on eliminating threats. The chaos of multiple bombs detonating in tight spaces amplifies the excitement, blending competition with unpredictable chain reactions. This social, fast-paced experience thrives on precise controls and responsive gameplay, ensuring actions feel impactful. But despite the fast-paced and exciting multiplayer experience, the quaint and colorful graphics and familiar gameplay make you never lose that cozy feeling. The multiplayer focus was so important to this game that Hudson Soft actually bundled their multi-tap peripheral, the Super Multi-Tap, with the game, enabling 4-player simultaneous play. Later on, they even released the Super Multi-Tap 2, which was somewhat humorously shaped like Bomberman's head. Created by HAL Laboratory and Ape Inc. and published by Nintendo, Earthbound is another in the long list of Golden Age Super Nintendo RPGs that many argue is one of the greatest in the genre. And while the story, scope, and depth of Earthbound are no less weighty than its peers, there are things that set the game apart and truly earn it a spot on this list of cozy entries for the console. Unlike the medieval fantasy worlds or futuristic settings of Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger, Earthbound is set in a quirky version of modern suburban America. Players explore towns, suburbs, and cities with everyday locations like diners, arcades, and schools. This setting feels familiar and grounded, evoking a sense of comfort and nostalgia that's proven quite lasting, especially for players who grew up in this very kind of setting. Earthbound's cast of eccentric characters, like the alien-like Mr. Saturn or the blue-obsessed Happy cultists, add a lighthearted, whimsical tone to the game. Its dialogue is packed with witty, absurd humor and pop culture references, often breaking the fourth wall. This playful approach makes the game feel less serious and more endearing, contributing to its cozy atmosphere, but without losing a certain underlying seriousness that still makes you eager to see things through to the end. The soundtrack of Earthbound, composed by Keiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka, is catchy, eclectic, and cheerful, blending jazz, rock, and chiptune styles. Tracks like the Onet Town theme or the peaceful Saturn Valley melody create a warm, nostalgic vibe that contrasts with the usual dramatic grandeur that RPG fans normally expect to hear. Bringing it all together is Earthbound's pixel art and retro graphics, with bright colors and cartoonish designs that felt nostalgic almost the minute the game released in 1994. Magical Poppin' was the first ever game worked on by producer Yasuhiro Wada, who you'll remember from earlier in this list as the famous producer of Harvest Moon, which he began working on immediately after this first attempt. The game is an amusing side-scrolling action platformer that immerses players in a magical adventure where you control a young princess tasked with recovering a stolen magic gem from the Demon King. Navigating 6 distinct stages, each with unique themes like lush forests, rugged canyons, and enchanted palaces. The gameplay centers on defeating enemies such as bats and penguins with a mix of sword attacks and magic, starting with a laser beam spell. As you progress, you unlock new abilities like ice spells, a grappling hook, and wall climbing skills, which open up creative ways to tackle obstacles and explore hidden paths. Non-linear level design encourages discovery with branching routes and secret areas filled with coins, used for extra lives, and treasure chests that restore health. This structure keeps you enthralled in every stage, as new spells and mechanics are introduced gradually, rewarding curiosity with new gameplay changes. Combat is straightforward yet satisfying, with boss battles punctuating each level's end, testing your mastery of the princess's growing arsenal. Obviously, the visuals shine with vibrant, detailed graphics and endearing character designs. The princess's animations, whether swinging her sword or casting spells, are smooth and expressive, bringing personality to every move. The environments burst with color and imagination, from whimsical flora to mystical architecture, crafting a world that feels alive and inviting. The game did receive some fairly mixed reviews on release, with criticisms of the lack of a save function, which was pretty standard by 1995, as well as the lackluster voice acting of the protagonist, provided by adult film star Ai Ijima. Despite these criticisms, Magical Poppin' maintains a cult following, and many think of it as a hidden gem. Original cartridges have become a pretty rare collector's item, and even though it only came out in Japan, Western gamers once more benefit from fan translations. Published by EA in 1994 and coming to the Super Nintendo a couple years later, Bullfrog Productions' Theme Park immerses players in the role of an amusement park manager tasked with designing and operating a thriving park, a full 5 years before the release of Roller Coaster Tycoon. The gameplay revolves around constructing a park layout, selecting from a variety of rides such as roller coasters and Ferris wheels, and placing them strategically to maximize visitor enjoyment. Players set ticket and concession prices, hire staff like mechanics and entertainers, and maintain the park to keep guests happy and profits flowing. The strategic depth comes from balancing finances while competing against rival parks by drawing more visitors and keeping them happy. This light hint of competition adds a bit of a driving force to excel. The game's presentation shines with colorful, detailed sprites and animations tailored to the SNES's hardware, paired with music and sound effects that enhance the lively atmosphere of a bustling park. Later titles like Roller Coaster Tycoon and Planet Coaster, and even 2 Point's Hospital Campus and Museum Sims, take obvious inspiration from Theme Park, a true pioneer that was way ahead of its time in a lot of different ways. Think of any electronic game platform that's come out since 1985, and odds are there's a Monopoly game for it. There have been an astonishing 36 games across almost as many different consoles, a list that continues to grow every single year. And why shouldn't it? The classic Parker Brothers board game is ubiquitous and beloved around the world, with friends and families alike enjoying it together over the years. One of the only complaints people have about Monopoly, other than that annoying little sister who will always refuse to trade you Boardwalk no matter what you offer, is that the setup and physical maintenance of the game are a little bit cumbersome. Monopoly in video game form solves this problem and makes the game ready to start at a moment's notice, so you can jump in as soon as you feel the urge to do so without having to look up yet again how much money you need to deal out to everyone at the start of the game. The Super Nintendo entry in 1992 was no exception. It provided pretty much exactly what it said on the tin, and it did it better than any earlier attempts up to that point, capturing the essence of the original board game in a more visually pleasing and pleasant way than ever. Some complaints about the slow AI moves when playing against the computer aside, the game is regarded as a decent way to play Monopoly, especially if you have a soft spot for the nostalgic pixel-based graphics and sound effects of the early 90s. But move over Monopoly, because there's an even older board game that's come out on an equally impressive list of electronic platforms. I'm speaking, of course, of chess. Chess came to the Super Nintendo in 1992 with the game Chessmaster, a long-running series with many games releasing between the 1980s and early 2000s. Chessmaster for the Super Nintendo delivers a robust chess experience tailored to the console's capabilities, engaging players through a blend of accessibility and depth. Its core functionality was a sophisticated chess engine, powering an AI known as the King, which adjusts to multiple difficulty levels. These range from beginner settings to advanced challenges, accommodating players of varying expertise levels. The flexibility ensures that novices can ease into the game while seasoned strategists face a worthy opponent. A standout feature is the teaching mode, which walks players through chess rules and tactics step by step, offering a structured way to grasp fundamentals or refine skills. This mode proves especially useful for those unfamiliar with the game, breaking down complex moves into digestible lessons. There's even a replay option during games if you make a mistake and you want to go back a turn. Beyond standard matches, the game offers the ability to set up custom board positions, letting players recreate historical games or design specific scenarios for practice. This feature adds a layer of versatility, encouraging experimentation and strategic exploration beyond typical play. The AI itself strikes a careful balance, challenging enough to demand focus, yet fair in its execution, avoiding frustration. Visually, the Super Nintendo version leverages crisp, clear graphics suited to the platform, with a straightforward interface that keeps the focus on the board. Overall, as far as chess games go in 1992, you couldn't do much better than Chessmaster on the Super Nintendo. Super Tennis delivers a tennis simulation experience centered around engaging gameplay mechanics and intuitive features tailored for the console. Players can dive into singles or doubles matches, facing off against the computer or a friend, with tournament modes adding a layer of competitive depth to the game. The control scheme stands out for its simplicity, mapping buttons to a variety of shots like lobs, slices, and volleys, which allows for precise placement on the court. This setup enables strategic play as the game supports an array of shot types, including topspin, backspin, and drop shots, giving skilled players the tools to outmaneuver opponents effectively. On the court, player movement feels smooth and responsive, letting you position yourself quickly for returns or aggressive plays, a critical aspect of any tennis game. The mechanics emphasize realistic pacing, with characters darting across the court to set up shots, enhancing the tactical feel of each match. The graphics, while typical of early SNES limitations, do serve their purpose well, paired with sound effects like the thud of the ball against the racket or the crowd's cheers, which deepen the immersion without overwhelming the experience. Super Tennis was the first Super Nintendo game developed by the legendary Toes Software, who have developed over 1,000 games since the 1970s, including many other excellent sports games on the SNES, in addition to the many Dragon Ball Z titles on the system, such as Super Butoden. Despite relatively disappointing sales, Super Tennis was very well received when it came out and is widely seen as one of the best tennis games of all time. In the Great Waldo Search, players are tasked with finding Waldo, his dog Woof, and magical scrolls across 5 distinct scrolling levels: the Carpet Flyers, the Underground Hunters, the Battling Monks, the Unfriendly Giants, and the Land of Waldos. Each level is a detailed scene inspired by the third Waldo book's illustrations, packed with hidden objects and characters. Using a magnifying glass controlled by the D-pad, players navigate these expansive landscapes within a time limit, needing to locate both Waldo and a scroll to complete each stage. Finding Woof unlocks a bonus minigame where players guide him on a flying carpet to collect bones for extra points, adding variety to the experience. Scattered clocks can extend the time limit or offer clues to uncover additional items. The game features 2 difficulty modes, normal and expert, with expert mode increasing the challenge by making objects more elusive or reducing clue assistance. A remake of the game came out for the Wii in 2009 that utilized Wii motion controls and also introduced a multiplayer versus mode. 8 games in 1! That was the promise of 1996's Kirby Superstar, a side-scrolling platformer with a unique hook. There were 8 distinct game modes. They are Spring Breeze, a simplified remake of Kirby's Dream Land, where Kirby uses inhale and copy abilities to defeat King Dedede across 4 levels. Dynablade, where Kirby investigates a giant bird disrupting Dreamland's crops, exploring maps, fighting bosses, and uncovering Dynablade's mystery. Gourmet Race, in which you race King Dedede, eating food and reaching checkpoints before he does, testing your speed and strategy. The Great Cave Offensive, where Kirby falls into a treasure-filled cave and you need to solve puzzles, defeat enemies, and collect treasures to escape. Revenge of Meta Knight, where you stop Meta Knight's conquest of Dreamland in time-sensitive, story-driven missions with challenging gameplay. Milky Way Wishes, a mode where you collect stars to summon the wish-granting comet Nova, and Kirby selects his abilities from pedestals, not enemies. The Arena, a boss rush mode where Kirby battles all the game's bosses in sequence with limited health recovery items. Megaton Punch, a timing-based minigame where Kirby competes to punch the ground harder than opponents, breaking through blocks. And Samurai Kirby, a reaction-based minigame where you face opponents in a quick draw contest, testing reflexes. For those of you keeping track, yes, that's technically 9 game modes, not 8. If you want to be precise, there are effectively 7 main modes and what you might call the extras on top of those. But no matter how you want to count its fantastically diverse game modes, Kirby Superstar is widely considered to be an excellent game, bolstered by the sheer variety that the different modes provide you with. Add to this the impressive and bright visuals and a solid fun soundtrack, and you've got the makings of a true classic. If you're playing with a friend, there's even the ability to summon a partner for some co-op multiplayer enjoyment. In an interview, creator Masahiro Sakurai explained why he thought the game was such a success. I had 3 pillars in mind. One was 2-player cooperative gameplay, and another was including actions similar to those in fighting games. The third was an omnibus format. The first one, 2-player cooperative gameplay, was a request from Miyamoto-san. That was really about the only request he made on fighting game action inclusion. Until then, when Kirby used the cutter ability, he threw blades. And when he used the fire ability, he breathed fire. And that would defeat weaker enemies with 1 hit. But in Kirby Superstar, we gave durability to even weaker enemies, so you have to hit them more than once to defeat them. And on the omnibus format, back then, players were paying high prices for games, so we boasted things like long playtimes and big maps. Basically, bulk had become one standard of value. I thought about having resolutions come more quickly, and that led to the omnibus format. I wanted to give each section its own plot in addition to providing different types of gameplay. The game was such a huge success, it positively demanded an enhanced remake on the DS 15 years later. Kirby Superstar Ultra was almost as well received as the original. Wagyan Paradise in 1994 is the 8th game in the classic Japanese Namco series Wagyan that began in arcades in 1987. Paradise is centered around Takuto and Karen, 2 dinosaur-like creatures exploring their home island. The game revolves around navigating a variety of levels filled with enemies and obstacles, driven by a unique mechanic. Players emit sound waves shaped like automatopoeia of the noises the characters are making, and these will stun your foes, allowing you to get by or even use their stunned bodies as platforms. The platforming itself strikes a welcoming balance, blending straightforward jumping challenges with light puzzle solving. Levels are crafted to keep players engaged but without feeling overly daunting, offering a smooth pace that invites exploration, especially for younger players or those that don't have a lot of platforming experience. This accessibility to beginners is a deliberate design decision and a focus of the game's developers. In fact, before you even start the game, it'll ask you how old you are, and if you say you're under 6, you'll start with full power, making things a bit easier. But gamers of all ages can appreciate the way this game showcases the SNES's signature colorful and whimsical art style, painting a sprightly world that's easy to get lost in. A Super Nintendo launch title, Pilotwings stunned with pseudo 3D effects, detailed landscapes, and fluid animations, leveraging the new hardware early on for impressive results, especially in its use of the famous Mode 7. Players take control of various aircraft, light planes, hang gliders, and rocket belts across a series of island-based courses. The loop centers on completing a range of tasks, such as landing precisely on designated targets, flying through rings, or executing aerial maneuvers. These challenges unfold across varied environments, including mountains, forests, and urban settings, where factors like wind gusts and turbulence demand careful navigation. The controls are simple, yet require skill to master. This balance of accessibility and difficulty keeps the experience dynamic. A scoring system tracks performance, awarding points based on accuracy and speed, which encourages players to refine their skills and revisit courses for higher marks. Pilotwings was well received when it first launched alongside the Super Nintendo, and it's aged surprisingly well, with Chris Scullion of the official Nintendo magazine noting in his positive review of the Virtual Console port in 2009, Pilotwings is still surprisingly impressive to look at. It makes great use of the SNES's Mode 7 capabilities to give a startlingly believable impression that you're flying in a three-dimensional space. Now I know what you're thinking. Anyone who's careened down the extremely challenging and fast-paced 7th level of the game knows how stressful and difficult Donkey Kong Country can be. And anyone who put together a list of cozy games clearly has no idea what they're talking about if they include this title on there. In fact, who is this guy? Probably some AI-generated voice that's not even real, trying to BS me about games its robot hands can't even feel. Doesn't even know what it means to be a retro gamer, what it means to feel human emotions like love, or even nostalgia. And you know what? You're probably right. About the DK coziness status thing anyway. But just hear me out for a second, or better yet, hear out composer David Wise. The DK Country soundtrack is one of the most relaxing, melodic, calming, and dare I say it, downright cozy scores you will ever hear in a game. The game's whimsical tone, humorous animations, and simple, playful story create a stress-free and comforting experience. And if you take your time and look around, at least on levels where you're able to, you'll notice the game features lush, vibrant jungle settings with detailed backgrounds and intriguing character designs. This playful, non-threatening, and yet extremely impressive art style creates a visually warm and welcoming world that can evoke a sense of comfort, especially for those with fond memories of this unique era of gaming when gameplay was king and innovations were made to enhance, not replace, the feeling of sheer fun you knew you were just about to get every time you sat way too close to your TV and flicked the power button on. If you've made it this far, we'd really appreciate if you would consider subscribing to our channel and liking the video. Your support means a lot.